Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. Our guest this week is a friend and yoga teacher of Corinne's, Tom Kelly, and he is got a website, Love Force Revolution. And man, what a trip! What a beautiful man.
Tom was a self-realization monk, celibate monk for 25 years from like the time he was 21. And so he tells a story of his turning point in his childhood and some other turning points. He shares his love and his heart as he always does.
Yes.
He's a motivational speaker and a spiritual coach, and was awesome talking to him. Sean felt very peaceful after the conversation.
I did, yeah. Listen to the same more. I felt a little emotional, which I do. I'm very in touch with my emotions as a man, and I was totally comfortable with that. But yeah, man, listen to the podcast, catch a vibe, and then check out his website and what he's all about.
Enjoy.
Absolutely.
Hey, welcome, Tom. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Corinne.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I miss you and Trisha so much. And when Sean and I started talking about doing this podcast a few months ago, y'all were like on the top of my list because everybody needs a little bit of Tom Kelly in their life.
Oh, well, thank you. That's quite a compliment. I appreciate it.
And you'll see as we do the podcast too, Sean is one of my favorite people on the planet. He's a very, very dear friend of mine. So I'm excited for you two to connect as well.
Right.
All right. So our podcast question that we start with is, many seekers can recall that point in time when they started to question the so-called reality they were taught, that turning point of conditioned beliefs. So what was a thought or feeling, or do you remember when your childhood programming no longer worked for you, or when you became a seeker?
Well, I do have a standout. When I was very young, I don't know, 6 or 7, my family had a little poodle, and his name was Clancy, and a family dog. And I totally love that dog. And when that dog got sick and that dog died, I just could not accept that. I was heartbroken. I realized that I'm a pretty sensitive guy when it comes to this, to life and the experiences of life, and of course the ultimate parts of life, like true love, friendship, awareness. That it's I'm super dialed into that, but you don't know it when you're really young. But anyway, the dog died and I was crushed, and I had to do soul searching right then and there.
Wow.
Just because I could not accept that this something that you love so much could die and leave you.
So what did you do as a 6 or 7-year-old what was your process at that point, obviously, as a young child, to soul search, to find out meaning, to cope with that loss?
Well, a heartbreak is not something that will just go away because you want it to go away. You got to be with the heartbreak, and I think that's part of the blessing of a heartbreak, because it turned me, turning point turned me within to ask questions, a lot of questions, not only within to myself but to my family, and through books, little children's books, I was just starting to question that something is not quite right here. There's some kind of a not a permanent way to go for life. That there's something that is amiss, and so I think it just became part of like, okay, I'm going to have to just stay pretty aware to see if this continues, if I keep finding myself with a broken heart, if I keep finding myself disillusioned, if I keep finding myself because I really couldn't take it. I just couldn't take the heartbreak. I guess from my perspective, years later, it's like many lives of heartbreak. And I probably made a decision in my last life that I was going to avoid the heartbreak at all costs, that I was going to find the solution once and for all, through spiritual focus, because I just turned right to the Catholic Church at that point, which I was just starting to be, able to go to big church with the family and do the Catholic things. A Catholic boy, I went to Catholic grade school and high school. So that was the religion that I found myself in with my family.
And did that suffice at that time?
Well, I wanted to trust it. I'm trying to turn to something where I could find some solace and some understanding. And I thought, wow, I was really excited to go to the church with them the first time that they let me. I thought, wow, everybody goes there, sees God, is in joy and happiness. And man, I want to go. And maybe that was the second little turn within point when I went there, and it's like, people are just like, there's there wasn't much expression. Big Catholic church, all the statues, all the things. It seemed so cold and empty, and God never came.
Mm. So this was shortly after that. Your dog passed, 6, 7 years old. Then you're going, to full Catholic mass,
Yeah,
participating. How long were you in that new space before you kind of had that realization of that emptiness? Was it pretty much immediately when that you discovered that cold emptiness within the Catholic Church?
Well, it was that, and then just the way I was brought up. Really, no complaints. Really blessed, fairly well-to-do family, and my parents, were not necessarily spiritual people, although they did do the once a week go to church, and but it's tied in because in our lifestyle, we belonged to a country club, and it was in Toluca Lake, California, and that's the Bob Hope Club in Crosby. Uh, uh, what's that comedian? W.C. Fields was there, and all these people, and we'd go there every Sunday evening for dinner, and I, tried to play golf and do all that, and it's fine. I mean, it was a luxurious place, but I never did seem to feel like there was anybody that was really happy.
Were there people in your life that could offer guide, even if they weren't happy? Did you get guidance from your parents, aunts and uncles, friends of the family at that time that could kind of fill that questioning void as a kid, or did you pretty much have to do it on your own?
Yeah, pretty much on my own. Although my parents would direct me to, maybe seeing the priest, talk to the priest, because I always kept thinking that God isn't the answer to all this.
Yeah.
And
what was some of the advice or guidance that the priest gave you at that time, as a young child?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't too listening to them, but I had a nun that was kind of grooming me to be an altar boy, and teach me how to do the readings at the big mass. Mm. And I did that, and then I had a priest that was kind of working with the young people. Luckily, there was no situation there.
Good.
Yeah, no situation, but they really didn't. They just kind of had the Catholic attitude. Yeah.
And that's something I just had a really good conversation with somebody about that. There's a lot of emphasis on the ritual, the process of serving, of being in that specific denomination of Christianity. But there seems to be a big gap when there's a lack of understanding, or on a young person who is questioning. It's, well, you shouldn't question. Well, I'm already questioning. So if I'm already questioning, I'm not getting something, I'm not understanding, but everybody around me seems to be getting something out of this. But because that was I have a very similar situation of, looking at it kind of from an observer's lens of, right, something seems to be amiss here, or at least it's not, if it's not connecting in general, it's certainly not connecting for me. And I still have these questions. There's still something deeper here that I'm not seeing. What was your next step once you kind of felt that disconnect, or once it still wasn't clicking? What was your next step then, adolescence and whatnot?
Well, once I finished the grade school uniforms and, doing everything as a little Catholic boy, in Catholic grade school. I went to Catholic high school, hoping maybe things would be a little different. Then, of course, life and and the hormones kick in, and and it seemed like the because it was a Catholic all boys school that you were more interested in the all Catholic girls school, and vice versa. And so you start playing around, and just like any other kid, did sports. And but I think now that you're talking this way, and I'm kind of rehashing all this, I think that not having the question answer is probably one of the greatest blessings in my life.
Sure. Right.
You know, because I had to go through what I was going through. I had to live my life in that situation where my karma had put me in the family that I chose, and they chose me in the Catholic thing. Because when it did come to finding the book Autobiography of Yogi, which was then after the Catholic high school, and I think it was my second, just going on my second sophomore in college at UCSB in Santa Barbara. Then in that book, there were the answers.
Go ahead.
In what book?
The Autobiography
Yeah,
of
of
Yogi,
course.
Paramahansa Yogananda.
Well, and
Yeah.
when Corinne and I first started talking about doing this podcast, kind of brainstorming some of the questions and the concepts and whatever,
Right.
Corinne brought up this deep question of what is the mechanism that puts somebody in a seeking position, or what is it? And like you just said, the fact that you didn't have your question answered was a huge grace, and that was something Corinne brought up early on when we were talking about this. Is like, it seems like there's this big grace that befalls you that gives you a perspective of questioning in the first place.
Right.
And like you just kind of resonated with that. It's like, had something giving you the answers, then you would not have found the rest of the seeking process. And what a tragedy that might have been.
Yeah, truly, truly. And like in AA, they have a saying that the pain is the attraction of our sobriety. It's the attraction. So, and for me, not getting what I want is probably the greatest thing that ever happened to me too. Which why I entered and became a monk for 25 years. Not that I understood that concept initially, but I was, renouncing the world and going against the grain of what would be easy to do, because I felt that there was I needed to do some deep soul searching and deep soul seeking. When it got to that point to follow Yogananda intensely and enter one of his monasteries, his ashrams, I should say.
So because that's a big leap. It's kind of like when we interviewed Werner, one of my teachers in India who lived in silence for 20 years. It's like, what, was it like a gnawing pain? Was it like just a lost or just a super connection with Yogananda? Like, what was it that just made you jump?
It's all of that, because also I was, wanted to find the perfect girl. I wanted to find the perfect human love throughout this whole thing, and so and I thought I found her, when I got to college, and but that thing turned into be another, probably the greatest heartbreak that I could ever have had, and in terms of lifetimes, because that thing, I thought I would die. I seriously, people do die of broken hearts, and
Yeah.
I really thought I would die, but something had told me inside, as the need to get to the bottom of this, because the pain and the lack of establishing a beautiful, loving relationship, to be loved as much as I wanted to be loved, and to give love as much as I wanted to give love, I wasn't coming close to it, and so that created such a um, volcano within me. And so when I started reading Yogananda's book, I just saw right away that here was somebody who just loved God. Like, it was like the only thing I saw in that book. I mean, there's miracles and this and that, but I thought, oh my God, this guy is for real. This guy, and he found that through that experience of samadhi, he found the love that he was looking for all his lifetimes. And it came to consume him. And so I think all of the above added to the fact that I was not going to be happy by seeking for a solution to any of this in the world, or the way that normal human beings go about it. So I got the lessons of SRF after I read the Autobiography of Yogi and dove in as a sophomore in college. I was 19 and I never have stopped. I'm 70 now.
I saw that when I looked up your website this morning, and I had no idea you were 13 years older than me. You're so awesome.
I'm 13. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, life is flying by, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and Sean's 34. He's just like, he's
Yeah,
just a, mm-hmm.
I'm just figuring out what life might not or might be. Just trying
Right.
to figure it all out. So, yeah. It's a trip, man. And that's what's, I think incredibly rewarding. Well, for me and for both of us is being able to have these conversations with people all over the board who have been in a seeking position, or on that path of seeking for so long. Is just there's we were just talking about this before that we got on with you. There's certain affirmations for a young seeker in hearing your story. Not that, oh, I need to do it the way Tom did it, but when you talk about what you were missing, or what you were seeking, or what you were struggling with, or the perpetuation of love loss, and the pain of that, and hearing how and we're gonna keep diving in, because I hear the next phase of your life, and that seeking was pretty profound, but it gives hope, because I think we depend so much on the material world for filling needs,
Right.
and what I've discovered, and of course what Corinne tried to smash over my head as a meditation teacher, is the completion is within. In meditation, there's a completion that happens by being in the present moment, having the mindfulness practice, not seeking for exterior forces to fill that void. And so it's really awesome to hear, those stories. So we love hearing about your pain, man.
Well, but and Yogananda said in one place that he said, pain is the greatest prod to your remembrance of God.
Mm.
It's the fuel, man. It's what you tend the sacred fire of loving presence with. If everything's going great on this planet, I'm telling you, you're not going to have the urgency to seek something else.
Yeah.
So for me especially, but I think it might be pretty common for seekers who are going to get serious about it, that things just don't work out, because this is a planet. Let's face it, there's a great delusion here, which then means that we are disillusioned continually.
Yeah.
We disillusion ourselves. The world is made to disillusion us. So I think it's a perfect setup that the divine would set it up this way, because he's saying, hey, there's a higher love, there's a greater happiness, there's a higher reality. The earth ain't it. But if you turn to me, you turn within instead of without, you may discover the great surprise. And that's kind of the Eastern kind of approach versus the Western approach, which I just gobbled up. My major in college was religious studies.
Well, but what's interesting is that the parallel that you're talking about, that is actually funny enough within the Western philosophy of Christianity, that renouncing earthly pleasures, turning within, turning towards God,
Right.
having that mindful practice. It's funny that Christ embodies a mindfulness practice.
Oh yeah.
And valuing the things that are eternal over the things that are impermanent. And yet what's amazing is is how easily that, and that's the disillusion. I agree with you completely about how this world is designed to disillusion you, to distract you, to think that you're going to be complete when you find more and more earthly pleasures. So it's the synchronicities are there between many faiths, and I'm not, the Eastern philosophy and the Western philosophy. It really depends on how you involve yourself with those philosophies, and what is your next step? What is your recommendation for diving into that mindfulness practice, and tell me more about that philosophy that you kind of discovered to live by.
Well, there's the, we're all in a different place, and every soul, like a thumbprint, there's no thumbprint the same.
Hmm.
All souls are, made in the image of spirit. They're all made of bliss, made of joy, made of light, made of love. However, our approach, how we're going to seek, how we're going to relate to what is not physical, cannot be seen with the five senses, that's not a tangible, let's take this substance and we're going to feel different. It's none of that. It's invisible. It's a non-physical reality. And I think that the key for me was that to explore within myself, that there is the solution, that the I am presence, that the God is in me 100%. St. Catherine of Siena said, "My me is God, nor do I recognize any other me but God himself." That turning point of taking all the disillusionment and all the other things that I wanted to do, of pleasures and family and career, and take the energy of that and funnel it into one search within, like a just harness, marshal all my forces, because I know where, if I turned and did it, what I have done in many lifetimes, perchance, have family, do things, follow my desires and my whims and all that, I knew where that could go. But what I didn't know is to dive into, at all costs, the spiritual path and the spiritual seeking, that, in a way of kind of the yoga, the go within, the temple of the heart. And I'm in total charge of that. I don't need a building. I don't need a teaching so much. Once I found Yogananda's teaching, that once you have your well and you can drink from that well, then I was like, I just knew that this was what my soul wanted me to do, even though it made no sense to my mind, and it did make no sense to my worldly desires, and made no sense to my other plans that I would have loved to have done, man. Besides go into an ashram, are you kidding me? But what my soul needed me to do.
So what was that? Can you share a little bit? Were you always, did you question your decision after a year, 5 years, 10 years? Because you were in it, would you say 25, 24 years?
Yeah, in the ashram itself, 25 years. I was probably 2 years waiting to get in the ashram. There was a long wait. So I I volunteered at one of Yogananda's places. I lived there, and I did cooking for the monks and just worked on the garden until 2 years before I was accepted to go into the place. But it wasn't until I got in, and it was November 1st in I went in 74, 1974. It wasn't until I got in, the doors closed behind me, that all hell broke loose, though.
Yeah.
What was I kind of thinking, that I was just going to just go and do this monk thing, and, and everything would be cool and I get real spiritual and stuff. No, it was like, so you asked me when did I start questioning what I did? The first day there was awesome. Half the second day, because I went in on a Friday, and Friday afternoon, I was ready to leave.
And had you already been doing yoga, meditation? You've already been doing
Oh,
spiritual practice, but
yeah, like those years I was
for a
at,
couple, yeah.
yeah, for some years I was diving in, you know.
So what man, that's fucking hilarious. What 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 hit you? What was different? Why did all of a sudden, your mindfulness practice day and a half in start destroying you?
Well, because my soul knows everything, so it knew that if I didn't just have a pretty focused, clear, you know, way to get in there, if that would have been difficult, I may not even have tried as much as I tried. So it knew that once I was there, it was going to be hard for me to leave.
Hmm.
So, every time you make spiritual effort, man, that means your ego doesn't care about what you're doing if you're just doing whatever you want. But as soon as you start to get serious about, changing your life, changing your habits, and growing your consciousness, the ego gets very busy and very active. And the harder you want to know the truth, the more the dark side is really, really going after you. So I think it just hit me. My ego kicked in. My desires for the world, I just went black. I went dark. I thought this is, and then I saw these guys. I started with 17 guys, and they were like, man, they were seemed like so holier than thou. They were like, oh my God, I don't know if I can take these guys. So everything it just went black. So I think it was the resistance that the ego is the resistance that we have around this stuff.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, you can be a good boy for a while, but then you have to go out and do the bad stuff
yeah.
just to keep it balanced.
So did you find, a lot of your conditioning, your ego conditioning, your programming, your perspective of the world, did you kind of become under attack from that, or, talk about that darkness, talk about the blackness that you went into? I mean, how long of a process were you in that blackness, or
I don't think if I really went into that process, that it would. I don't know. Maybe I shy away from telling people how dark it was for me and for how many
Mm-hmm.
years it was for me.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I still have some of my early diaries, and if I read through them, it is so dark you wouldn't believe it,
Wow.
and I couldn't believe it anyway. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't fall asleep at night until I just cried my eyes out. And for example, I had a mantra that I had to go to sleep with because I couldn't think of how I was going to make it through the next day.
Mm.
And it was this mantra or prayer. It said, Lord, help me to do that which I must do. Help me to do that which I must do. And I don't usually pray that way. I usually bring a lot of devotion and this and that into it. But that was the only thing I could do. Is I cried myself to sleep night after night after night after night. It was like demons. It was like the culmination of lifetimes of bad habits, tendencies, conditioning, wrong ways of living, indulging in my senses, all that stuff. It seemed like all of it was just gathered there to say, hey man, you're not going nowhere. You're not gonna get away from us, you know. We're still so it just seemed like, and for years, and it continued. So I had more depressions in the ashram. So I worked through lifetimes and lifetimes of depression, like you've never had depression, like frozen solid, still couldn't move a foot to go, just how depression freezes you up, and
Yeah.
anxiety paralyzes you almost.
Yeah.
I had so many episodes of that.
Wow.
So it's hard for me to describe how hard it was, and at the same time I knew it was how my soul wanted to go about this, because the harder it got, the only thing I had was to turn within. I had nowhere to go. I wasn't leaving, even though I wanted to. And you have silence much of the time, early morning, evening, on the weekends, during meals, and you go to your room at night, and there's just, you have a little 8x10 room, and there was nowhere for me to turn except to, and for me, it ended up being Divine Mother, because I couldn't have women. We had a vow of celibacy, couldn't have it, but that's the greatest blessing, man, for me, because I couldn't have that other thing, but I wasn't going to go after it. So what am I going to do with my time and energy? Luckily, through, I think, the blessings of God and maybe my seeking in past lives, I just turned within and just focused in my meditations. I had nothing else to do. There was nothing else that brought me any kind of solace. And what I did was, the techniques that Yogananda gives were okay, but they didn't work for me. So I just ended up like singing chants and pouring my love out to Divine Mother and crying to her, just like a kid, like a baby.
Wow. Wow, that is humbling.
I can't believe you, like, the way my mind is, like, I would just get out of there. Like, if I didn't like something that much, I would leave. So, and I can see where I've done that in my life, and it's perpetuated. And now, I can draw parallels for sure. So but you never had a point until you finally, have made that decision, which I want to hear about too, after 25 years. But you never were like, I'm going to give up. I don't want to do this. This is it. All you didn't know anything else, but you knew you had to be there.
Well, it was both. It was like I was hanging by a thread. I had, just hormones. If you thought you had sexual desire before you went into sexual, my God, what a force. So I turned to exercise. I was probably still, to the day of all the monks, did more jogging, did more cycling, anything I could to move that energy, right? But still, everything haunted me. But it was both going on at the same time. It was like, I can't do this, and I want to. I need to get out of here so bad. And at the same time, my soul said, "No, no, no, you're not going anywhere." It was two things.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know how I pulled it off.
For that,
I don't know to this day. I don't know how I pull it off today.
Wow. Well, and I thank you for sharing that. I know that's, like you said, that's a difficult thing. It's hard to even articulate something that deep or dark, or again, because it was a experience over a long period of time. I think that's incredibly valuable and helpful for people to hear. So thank you. That's incredibly helpful for me to hear. Not because it makes it easier,
right?
But because it makes it that much more powerful. To put yourself in that crucible of self-reflection and really dealing with all of those elements, and it's amazing how hell-bent on self-preservation the ego is. And the ego is that programming, those patterns that don't want to be changed. I mean, that's simply, I'm not gonna pretend I simplify the process of the ego, but I mean, in the simple form, it's the programs and the patterns that want to be maintained. And spiritual practice, that mindfulness, there is no pattern. There is just godliness, fullness, that ethereal space that the ego can't exist in. If you're trying to get there, every part of that ego pattern is going to stop you from getting to that point. And it is difficult, and it is like being in the wilderness alone, and without
it's a journey of 1,000 faces. It's a hero's journey. Every one of us is this, for the soul to reascend, and for a person to be accountable, that their only accountability is to the source of their life.
Yeah.
And all of this other is God's problem, not our problem. Yeah. It all hell's going to break loose when you decide that you want to have your soul freedom back. It's, what's perfect is the macro of what's happening with the political scene, and the micro what's happening inside the individuals in our nation right now, probably on the planet right now.
Yeah.
And that is, there's a chance for change. People are screaming for justice. They're screaming for their rights. They're screaming for, equality, all the things that probably since the beginning of time people have done. But to have this new, this other new elect now, Biden coming in, not to take sides on any of it, but to me, what excites me is that I want to be soul elect. That I don't want my ego to reign anymore within me. I want my soul. So I gotta bring a team in, a transition team of the holy ones, the gurus, Christ, Krishna, whoever you want, Divine Mother, and they're going to be my strategic team as I regain the throne of the kingdom of my nation, of my body, mind, heart, and soul. Because the yogis say that the crown chakra is where your soul resides. Hmm. So I want to, and that's cosmic consciousness in your crown chakra, the Sarashara center. So to me, this is just perfect time that to decide who is running you, who is in charge of you. And if you got problems with things, maybe the problems aren't really out there. Maybe there's something, maybe you're just being disillusioned by the ego. And this is a chance for the soul to run the show within the person first. So I'm so glad that for some reason I isolated, I renounced, I went into, we meditated 3 to 6 hours a day. And but to just face those demons and do what I need to do. Lord bless me that I do what I have to do.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
So was there a turning point? Was it a slow ship, or was it anything overnight when that just calmed down finally for you, and you started to enjoy meditation and the ashram life?
Well, that was the thing. I got so inspired when you said your subject is turning point, that you're doing this around turning point, because right then that day when you said that, or you wrote that to me, I realized, oh my God, the turning point is the whole key, because it's a turning point every time that you turn your attention either to the world or to the soul. Classic Bhagavad Gita, the battle within, and so it's endless turning points every single day that for me to regain that leadership of my soul over my ego, I'm like eternal vigilance, that I'm constantly turning away from that which isn't going to serve me and constantly turning to my practice, to my meditation, to my, walking with God, talking with God, my chanting, the devotion, constantly turning to that to this day. So there's no one point, except that I could probably signal out some points, but it's the continual little things. That's why Mother Teresa said that not everyone can be do great things in the world, but everyone can do little things with great love.
Mm.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about.
We can't take on a bunch of stuff here. We can't take on a bunch of, with your life, that when you're focused on the thing that is the best thing for you, you can leave a lot of other stuff alone. And that's when you're the happiest, and that's when it's the simplest, and that's when you feel the freest. And I think that the way God has set this up, that there's nothing he wants from us. You're not going to be asked when you go to the other side, or even he will even be mentioned what you thought, oh, this is what I did. I helped these people do this, and I did this, and I did that. God ain't going to ask you about that. The only thing that's going to be evident to you and clear to you is how much did you love, for love's sake, for nothing in it for you. How much did you just love that divine one, that most beautiful one? How much? How much did you just, turn to that divine? How many times did you turn to that divine one and away from what was easy, what the ego wanted to do, and what you've done for so many lifetimes? or to even begin to change the tide in one lifetime. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to get through the worst of it in this life. I don't have any expectations. And so what that amounts to, I guess what I'm saying, the only thing I'm capable of is this moment. I am incapable, just like the AA thing, I didn't have to go through that, but I love their philosophy. And they say, in a nutshell, the first 3 steps is you can't, God can, let him. It's like the first 3 steps. You can't.
Yeah.
God can, let him. So for me, it's like I am a total special need. I am totally dysfunctional without God. Without being on my own, I totally cannot do it. In this, we're under the great delusion. So it's one thing to become sober with alcohol, but to become awake with realization from this great Maya and delusion and this just seeming separation and illusion that we're in. Oh my God, you got to really just say, hey, I can't do this, Lord. I'm all yours. Sorry about that. Got to turn that darn thing off. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel more, it does make sense. It's hard to articulate and it's hard to understand unless you start going through that self-reflection process. And, as soon as you, it is the sacrifice. I mean, you sacrifice the earthly pleasures, you sacrifice the ego needs, you sacrifice, and like you said, the turning points are a constant focus and vigilance on mindfulness, always, all the time. And, I think there seems to be these plateaus, or at least in my life, there's been these like plateaus and then this profound realization. It's more of like profound affirmation, or profound understanding, or, you finally get this macro view of your life where, you, I think early on, and I was certainly, I loved the drama of the spirituality and the drama of, I'm going to become a very spiritual person and that's going to look like this. And it's da, 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 and I was fixated on that for a long time. And it's not really all that glamorous from a world perspective, from an ego perspective. The spiritual walk is not that glamorous. It's, what do you do? Well, I meditate. Okay, well, how do you do that? What does that look like? What is it? What do you feel? It's like, I meditate and I try to empty and I refill from that, that well you talked about. And I'm saying all this. Corinne has literally walked me through this whole process, and
Nice.
a huge proponent of of a gracious teacher, of allowing me my process, but also reminding me to keep coming back to that mindfulness. And what's interesting is it's almost like the sacrifice is always doing the thing that you don't really want to do, but like you said, that your soul is calling you to do. And it's really a very difficult process to develop the intuition to maintain that mechanism.
And all we're doing is just, you say the big picture. You didn't say big picture, but that
Yeah.
You did kind of say it in different words. That's so key, because we're just seeing this little lifetime,
Yeah.
and the players that are in this lifetime and the family that you have going and the kids that you have going. But man, you've had many families. You've had many loves. You've had many losses. It's just been countless. So the big picture is that, I often say, if we can change one bad habit in this life, that is a very successful life. One bad one. If we plug up one bad habit that we've had maybe since we were little, and we transmute that energy, and it no longer, we pray on it, whatever, we've changed it. You're very successful life, highly successful. But if you can do 2 more of those, it's a highly spiritual advancement life.
Mm.
So
Sorry that I had. I think we get that. So walk. So how long into that experience in the ashram, you know, until you started to be? Did you ever get comfortable in sitting in that, or because eventually you came out of the ashram? Is that correct? 24 years later, what was the process of confronting that dark side, confronting the ego, creating your process, having the realization, and then coming out of that ashram?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah,
It's a
just
loaded question, but that's everyone asks it. Everyone asks it, that, and then well, then how did you meet Trish?
Yeah.
That might be another podcast because that relationship is worth mentioning. Well, let me just tell you that after 25 years, after a certain number of years, I forget what it was, but you realize that you're a lifer there because you don't, after a certain time, you're in it. You don't question it anymore. You're just a lifer. And so things unfolded in my life where I got to do a big introspection, I think a month retreat towards the end. And a lot of things were happening. A lot of changes were happening in my duties and this and that. And so I went out on a like a vision quest retreat for a month at one of our ashrams out in Escondido, California. And I started journaling because this will explain how it was that it came about that I ended up knowing it was the right thing to do to leave. And I started to journal some fears. I just had some fears come up, so I just wrote them down. Well, they kept coming. And I just would write them as they came. I just decided, okay, just put it out there. So page after page after page were fears about why I should not leave the ashram. And boy, I was getting really depressed fast with all that fear that I didn't know I really had about leaving. And so that was, pretty good sized little journal. And I had to just put it down after I couldn't come up with any more fears. It was some days later. And I just said, hey, I can't go. I'm not going. I can't go. I can't. I just too many fears to go back into the world, But it didn't satisfy me to say that. And I was still unsettled until one morning I woke up and said, wait a minute, man, go to that first one you wrote, that fear, and write the opposite. Write the opposite of that fear. So I wrote down the opposite of that fear, that first one, and automatically I went, whoa, I feel so much better. So much better. So I went through all those pages, took me days, and I put the positive, the antidote to all those negative emotions, all those negative fears. And when I was done with that process, I knew it was super clear. I was absolutely in tune with my soul that it was time to go.
Mm.
And do you know I still have that book, and sometimes I use it in workshops because I want people to go through the exercise of writing down their fears and then make a column, and on the other side, put the opposite to it. Find a way to put a positive slant on it. And do you know not one of those fears came true?
Of course not. Why would it?
but if I would have stayed, I would have been living with that stuff, man.
Right.
Because it's so easy to in a spiritual ashram to kind of rest on your laurels because you got the environment, it's difficult, you don't have the worldly pleasures, but you can get pretty cozy in just being like using the ashram for safe harbor.
Yeah.
And you never really know how would you do out in the world now. How would I do? And those fears were like, you're not going to do well at all. You're going to go down. You're going to become a worldly person again, blah, 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 blah. And, but I didn't. And I proved to myself that the spirituality that we're all seeking, not everyone can be in an ashram, and not the ashram ain't the answer either.
Right.
If it is your thing to do to reface yourself, great. But how could I have gone through, learn that if I didn't leave? and find out that it's my relationship with Yogananda. It's my relationship with God. It's the practicing in the world without, of course, Trish and I, and the environment of the Soul of Yoga that we started became our environment, because we do believe the environment is really important. After I left, I knew the power of environment, that I was going to surround myself with spiritual people.
Yes.
I do know that. I know that's my savior, the environment.
That's why I used to love to go to Tom's classes. That's his yoga studio that he and Trisha started in San Diego and Encinitas, how
Gotcha.
I eventually met them. Yeah, Soul of Yoga. So how soon after did you meet Trisha?
Well, our paths crossed. I was giving a sermon in the 80s at Yogananda's Pasadena Temple in Pasadena, California. And she was pregnant with her first child, who's now 30 something. And in an SRF service, minister finishes his talk and goes to the back of church, and then he's just there and he just pronouns and greets everybody. There's not a lot of discussion. At the very end, when everyone had gone, Trisha waddled up, big belly, and looked at me in the eyes. Those are the first words that she ever said, and the first time I ever set eyes on her. She said, "I didn't agree with what you said." Usually the parishioners never say that, never. What? And yet, at the same time, just how when you see a friend from before, it's just like, whoa, got lost in this knowledge, in this intuition. I know this soul. So I was dealing with that, plus just answering her question of why is it that, what did you not agree with? I thought that we often laugh about that.
What was it?
Actually, what didn't she agree with?
Oh, I was talking about that you cannot die in your dreams.
And she said you could?
She said I did.
Yeah, I've died in my dreams, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you mean like you can't, I see. So, but obviously not, you don't physically die, but in your dreams you have a death experience.
Yeah, in your dreams you have a death experience.
Mm-hmm.
I never did, but I guess I just threw it out there, and then and she wanted to correct me on it. God bless her soul. So that was it, because she said I have died in my dreams.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, me too. Mm-hmm.
So you were called to bring the spiritual perspective space, everything that you gathered from within the ashram out into the world again. And, I find that's interesting because, that seems to be somewhat of I don't know, I don't want to say a commonality, but like you mentioned for a quick second, yes, you can find that in an ashram, but the ashram doesn't define that realization, right? That realization is possible outside of the ashram, within the ashram, outside of the ashram. The key of being, a flesh body is have the spiritual experience, have the profound understanding, and then carry it with you into these other spaces and feel that, and it's pretty cliche, but, be that light, in the dark spaces. If you just stayed in the ashram, yeah, the ashram would have been lit up as can be, but eventually something calls you out into the world to share that light and to, be that light for other people and that guiding, source.
Well, I think it was my next phase. For me, it's always been going in there. I didn't look back, and staying all those years. I didn't, I know I wanted to leave so many times, but I always felt best when I just knew that I was in there for life. I was giving this lifetime to God. That was my thing. When I saw Trisha for the first time, or any other woman, and that I caught their eyes. We were trained actually to not look into the eyes, but just look off to the shoulder, because the eyes are so magnetic. There's so much soul energy in those eyes, that I just kept saying to the Divine Mother, because she became my love, that this life's for you. This life's for you. One life is nothing. I'm staying with you. And I have that next time.
Hmm.
But this one's for you. And I think that and I never did, I was always in integrity in the ashram too. I didn't try to be somebody there. I wasn't trying to look like some other, major popular monk or something like that. I just was myself.
Hmm.
And I wasn't necessarily, I was a little bit painting around the edges in terms of the way of life there. Nothing serious, but I wasn't necessarily the model monk. But I'm so glad that I stayed true to myself because I didn't have to change anything when I came out.
Gotcha. So what was the mechanism when you did come out? Did you ask Divine Mother? Did you ask God? Intuition? Now it's time to, obviously you married Trish. So, what was that mechanism or questioning? Was that a difficult thing to cross? And by all means, stop me if I'm getting too deep into, I definitely don't want to, but you mentioned that this life is for God. So then how did that come about that God asked you or intuition guided you then to be in a relationship then after having been in the ashram that long?
Well, because then, I told you how I met Trisha, but then she served with the nuns for 20 years as a lay disciple. She was the first lay disciple to be in the inner circle of the SRF nuns.
Wow.
To work there. Now they have a lot of employees and disciple employees, but she was the first one. So she worked 20 years. And so with Trisha, it was like, and then she was on committees that I was in charge of, and we had, cross paths. She became a friend with my sister, my blood sister, and things like that. So our paths went like this. But I'll tell you one thing, that, Trish is like an ashram. Like she is the highest soul, and including all those monks that I live with that I could live with. So it's like, and I knew her love for God is like beyond, and her, God's first. We took our vows and we gave vows to God first, and then we gave them to each other. So it's like, what a blessing that I could come out and just keep going and doing everything I did. We still have our routine. We still meditate. We started the Soul of Yoga. So we have the spiritual community. And it's just like, but with the freedom, I think for me in this life was to be free of religion, to be free of organization, to be free because I saw clearly that my love for Guru Yogananda and the essence of his spirit versus the organization, that I want to be free of all organizations. I don't want to be tied to anything but spirit.
That's where identity comes. When you tie yourself with anything other than spirit, it becomes an identity. It becomes
limitation.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And we lose some of our true soul power because we've given it to something else. Mm-hmm. So I didn't look back the day I left, and Trish and I just, we just kept going, kept meditating together and and, started the Soul of Yoga and spent 20 years there. And now we've we worked ourselves out of a job kind of thing. And here in Georgia, kind of semi-retired, man.
Beautiful.
That's right? That's kind of the way I feel. Well, at least right now I'm living sort of a monk life, kind of retire, do a little bit of Zoom yoga and do a little bit of coaching, right. But nowhere near what I used to do at all. And it feels so good. Right. To just not have those, just the desires come up all the time for creativity and all that mess of stuff. It's just like so nice to be quiet.
Right? Because your divine beloved of forever wants to spend quality time with you, and these are the most important years. So your relationship with the divine, and that's what it is for me right now. It's just like, God, I'm so free in being. It's like, so you asked me, Sean, about when there, or you did, Corinne, about, was there a moment where it just kind of turned and everything? Yeah, now.
And now.
And now.
And now, yeah.
And
Well,
now.
and that's what's, man, it is, and I have expressed immense gratitude over the years, to Corinne, and, we've spent a lot of time together talking and discovering the spiritual world and being in that ethereal space. And, that is ultimately the catalyst for this podcast. But,
Right.
What's interesting is her, I have my perspective of my spiritual journey, but then I have her, kind of as the guru. Now we're good friends. But if you look back,
A teacher, yeah, for
a
sure.
teacher. But I mean that was someone that had my perspective with me as I was going through it. But it was an objective thing, and I'm not trying to get into titles or anything, but the gratitude that I have, and even for all the people that she's been introducing, through this podcast, and for your story, and that path, because you guys, I'm semi-retired, and I'm living a monk life, and I'm like, I'm in the shit of my family life with 3 kids and starting a business, and so much world and so much, but I've been creating this space, and I've been really trying to stay with that intuition of just, okay, yes, you're in the world, and yes, you're with this, and there's a lot of people that need your attention. But while that's happening, how do you maintain that gravity towards the intention, towards God, towards source, towards spirit, and allowing and inviting that into the everyday, and 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 it both gives me hope, but also very, very depressing to hear. Yep, and now at 70 is my turning point when I'm semi-retired. But I'm joking. But it's like, there's a certain level of hope there of like, don't expect it to end. That commitment, that sacrifice, that spirituality. Once you have that mechanism of mindfulness, that's it. Keep going towards that. So
The constancy, the constancy of our attention, where's that the ability to keep yourself focused on the divinity versus the mind stuff and the world stuff. And so it just eventually God's going to keep gracing you and blessing you, and without you even knowing it, you'll be able to do it a little. You don't even know that you're able to do it. That's the crazy thing. But all of a sudden, you just kind of, at moments where you just kind of stop and just take a big picture view on yourself, you realize, oh my God, you almost start crying because you realize, oh God, I'm with you and you're with me, and that's all I want.
That's beautiful. I mean, that has been, you kind of touched on this time of, our society, and, the pandemic, and everybody's got to be home, and that it's difficult because I know a lot of people are suffering. I mean, we're all suffering to a certain degree at some point, and it's hard to say that this pandemic has been somewhat of a blessing because of how much of a catastrophe it's been. But that's what change is. We all want change, but we all want it to be easy too, and that's not necessarily how that's going to work. And one of the biggest blessings is having these profound moments of gratitude, where it's just, I'm not in control. I'm just going to walk around the property and just I'm just going to exude that thankfulness and that gratitude for not even what I have, but just for the space I get to reside in. And that's been profound this year. And, and having, like I said, the gratitude of having people in my life that have helped me maintain that process for long enough for me to achieve this level of gratitude it just kind of folds in on itself. It double downs on that, thankfulness. And so, your story touches on that in a lot of ways. And it's, you can't ever be complacent in that vigilance towards, spiritual continuity with mindfulness.
Well, you can, but spirit's going to come along and poke you.
Yes. There's consequences. For sure. Yes, for sure.
Man, the most important thing here, I think, is the cultivation of fearless faith and total trust.
Yeah.
It's all this is. It's all this is. It's like, what made Christ so great was his unbelievable faith in God the Father.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So, Tom, I have a question for you with that, because us, the 3 of us, have that trust and that faith. Now, not to say that it hasn't grown and enriched over the years, but we all have that, like that's what, but I do have a few of my coaching clients that have asked me, how do you trust? Do you have an answer to that?
Well, first, it's great to ask that question. It really is, because each individual is going to have to give themselves some kind of an answer.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do to trust? Well, if you really want to look at it in simple terms, you start trusting. What do I want more love in my life? Well, the answer to that is, well, you need to start loving more. I need more peace in my life. Well, then you have more opportunities to practice being at peace in your life. And faith, well, you're having a bad day and the stress is on you and the anxiety and the kids need you and the this and the that. Big exhale breath, just turn yourself in. I like to say, turn myself into my soul, turn myself into the law, surrender and have a moment in your soul where you just let it all go, but your heart is given over to the divine. See, if you can have some pure moments with God. Remember, God doesn't want anything from anybody else but you. And he wants your love, and he wants to be with you, and he wants to be in a love affair of all time. The greatest love story ever told. But if you can have those moments, make the turning point and make a moment count, 30-second little break from being human and relief from the grief, and just turn within and just be with that beloved. There's got to be love there. It's got to be an intimate love relationship with love itself or God. And then you start to love those little moments and trust those little moments and feel those little moments more than, and if you can say, I love to be with God more than anything in the three worlds. If I love to be in love with love when I close my eyes and go into my heart space, and more than anything in this world, that's a golden moment of trust. That's a golden moment of faith. And it's so simple, right? It doesn't require anything. You don't have to be anybody. You don't need titles. It's just you and the divine beloved of you.
That's a practice. That was something that came up in another podcast about the difference between a pattern and a practice.
Right.
Pattern is something you're at the mercy of, is something that's controlling you, and a practice is something that that you're bringing awareness and mindfulness. And that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked the question, and I'm really like your answer to that question, because I think I definitely fall into that category of it's like, well, how. That was something that I remember as a kid in Christian church asking that. It's like, well, I'm just supposed to have faith. How and what? And there's so many gaps in that. Well, you just got to have faith in God, but that's the mindful practice of turning your awareness on having faith and continue those practices.
Because you're activating your soul power, which is maybe dormant for most people, but in that practice, you're activating the soul itself, and the soul itself is the trust. The soul itself is the faith.
Yes.
But you got to put something in. You got to put some chips into this, man. You got to throw something into this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where your attention goes. I mean, my garden has been the biggest teacher. I have this amazing garden. It's never had so much attention as it did during quarantine. My yard and my garden look amazing this year just because it has the attention, and it's been such a deepening for me to work in the earth over the years. Because I was a musician traveling around and never could have a garden before. And now it teaches me every day. It's like, if I ignore my garden for a week, there's a lot of shit that can happen and a lot of bad things that can happen in my garden in a week. It has to be every day.
Right.
Every day.
Well, it's such a perfect analogy, because you're growing a garden of these flowering soul qualities in your heart. And it's not just like you can leave that alone for a week. This is the thing. This is the key. What is ignorance? It's ignoring. Ignore is that part of the word ignorance, right? Ignore.
Love that.
The moment when we ignore the truth of us and our oneness with God and love and spirit, that is when the garden is in trouble.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's like turning point. We got to go back and work in the garden
Yeah.
24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, and look at how beautiful it is with that loving attention. Now you put that 100% unequivocally, ask God for all the help, surrender your effort even at it, or you even try and give it all back to love itself, and live in the garden of your heart. Live there. You don't go anywhere else. You don't do anything else. You tend to that, and you're going to grow all these beautiful soul qualities,
I love it.
right? Which you are.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is a reflection of what's been happening for me personally too. I mean, on the material level, the food then I get to eat and nourish me, but it's also cultivated more, even more of a mindfulness and presence, and a turning to every moment. In the last, it's just growing for me in the last years. It's like every month, I can't believe there's more presence and more awareness and more every moment being aware, consciously aware in each moment.
Yep. Well, you're gonna keep having wonderful surprises, because the divine revealing itself to you is the great surprise, and it's going to continue to do that till you realize, whoops, little Corinne ain't even there no more.
Mm-mm.
It's all you, Lord. It's all you, beloved.
Absolutely.
Won't that be fun? Won't that be fun that we don't even exist as this ego?
Yeah.
We don't even exist as form. We never have. We never will. This is all a dream.
All a dream in the mind of God.
So thank you. I can see Divine Mother in you, and I can see the Divine God in you, Sean. So thank you for your beautiful light and love. I really am high being with both of you. Thank you so much.
Man.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Thank you for sharing your story, and for, just so much of your heart, as you always do, and your time. It's very special spending this time with you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Blessings. Thank
Blessings.
you. I was just really filled with the connection with both of you. Big time.